Team, we're going to be discussing the ideas of international trade, market structures, markets, the market model, okay? Our major model created by the Adam Smiths of the world, the Alfred Marshalls, and elaborated on by a few others. UEXC8 is the Nearpod code. If you wouldn't mind jumping into there, that would be fantastic. UEXC8 is the code. It will appear, of course, in the top left-hand corner, all right, which might appear to be the right-hand corner for you. I'm not entirely sure how that works. Now, where last we left off, we were talking about what a market is, and we were discussing the idea of a market structure. And in the market structure, we saw that there could be different levels of competition within a market structure. We had like a continuum, all right, with really competitive at one end and completely not competitive, uncompetitive at the other. So the very first end, the one that I tend to put on the left over here, is perfect competition. Right? Now we're using the term perfect, so we are automatically going to assume that this cannot happen in real life. Right? Because I know you're thinking that you consider yourself to be perfect, quite possibly, but the reality is, just based on the word itself, there are very few things that we could actually ascribe to being perfect. Right? I remember in maths we used to talk about perfect numbers, along with obviously transcendental, social, and amiable ones. Right? For those of you playing the maths game at home. I always liked the transcendental ones. I thought they were kind of cool. So, this idea is very theoretical. So there are some learners who get stuck right here and they say, but there's no real life examples, I can't do that. Yeah, you can get close to it, and that's kind of the point. The point is that we see competition in economics as being efficient. So we want to try and get as close as we can to the idea of perfect competition, because that then is more efficient, all right? With efficiency being one of our key concepts. Now, here's the thing. I was just at the mall just a little while ago. The one just nearby here. All right, scan in, fully vaccinated, scan in. All right, and you see there as you walk past the shops that where the shops are positioned, you kind of think, well, that seems a bit odd. And there's a whole row of cell phone shops right next door to each other. There's 3 of them. Okay. They are different branded cell phones, right? Different companies, and they're right next door to each other. Now that is quite competitive, you would assume, right? Because the customers are going to go from one shop to the next to the next. They're all, well within walking distance. So that should be very competitive. But what do you think that perfect competition might look like? What would have to happen in order for the level of competition to be considered perfect? So just where you are in the chat box, right? If you can add a few thoughts, give you a few seconds, put a thought or two in, what would make the level of competition between businesses perfectly competitive? What do you think needs to happen? There you go, have a thought and chuck something into the chat box. Right, you don't need to ask Dr. Google. Just in your head, if something is perfectly competitive, if there's 2 businesses and they are perfectly competitive with each other. Yes, Senna, absolutely right. Hopefully that isn't a Dr. Google answer. What does homogeneous mean, Senna? You're right, products would have to be homogeneous. That means they're the same, absolutely. Right? The same type, genus, the word genus, those of you who are science people, means type. So they are of the same type. All right? So all of the products would be identical. They'd have to be, wouldn't they? In order for the businesses to be perfectly competitive, there could not be any difference in the product. Because if there was, then one company would have an advantage over the other. Yes, they are price takers, Zarfan. Absolutely right. Yes, selling the same product, lots of information. Yeah, you're absolutely right. There will be lots of information. However, the amount of information, we're going to use a descriptive in there. We're not just going to say lots. We're actually going to say perfect information. Because, again, there has to be perfect information. If it is to be perfectly competitive, it's going to have to be perfect information. All right? You, the consumer, are going to have to know every possible thing there is to know about that product. The producer is going to have to know every possible thing there is to know about you, the consumer. All of your wants, all of your desires with regards to the products, your income levels, all of that, your tastes, your preferences, anything that there is possible to know about you, they need to know as well. Free to enter and exit. Yes, absolutely right. That's absolutely, because then a business can just all of a sudden start, right, and be competitive, and then another business stop and go and do something else. Yes, they can enter the industry. What else do we got here? Let's see. Gosh, you've got some good thoughts coming in. Equal advantage to attract customers. Yes, absolutely right, Faisal. Well done. Same products. Yes, they are. They're price takers. They're the same. An incentive to innovate. It's an interesting idea. Yes, in a way you could say that. You could make that as an argument. You could. Because the innovation would then drive the competition. The innovation would give you an advantage, maybe extra revenue, etc. And so, yes, you could make that as an argument. Yeah, you could. However, once you identify a difference with your product, you're then in a different market. So then it becomes not perfectly competitive. Yeah. Each firm is a small part of their market, so none of them controls the market. Absolutely. So you remember we talked about that idea of market power. How much market power does each individual firm have? What do you think? How much market power will each individual firm have? How much control over the market? How much power do they have? I like that, yeah. Yes. Equivalent power, yeah, it will be. Because the comment that Jan made was that there is no control. Adam said very little. Senna said like almost none. Right. Effectively, zilch, zero. They can't have any market power. Because as soon as you give them even a tiny bit of market power, they will have a competitive advantage over another business. And we can't have that. So you right away, when it says, are there any in real life, you're starting to see just how difficult it would be to create one of these markets. In fact, effectively, more or less impossible. It's more likely now than it ever has been before in the history of the world, right, to have more competitive markets close to perfect competition. And if you were to analyse markets like the stock market, to an extent, maybe the futures markets, those sorts of markets where you can create mini markets within them, they can perhaps be more competitive. Right, you could make an argument that everybody has the same sort of information, more or less. Yeah. So, with the advent of the internet, with the advent of technology, we are seeing more competition, okay, appearing, and at the same time, the level of technology has enabled the innovations that was mentioned before, which then makes it less competitive in a way, because you're then able to differentiate, make different your product from everybody else's. Yeah. So those of you who buy products online, okay, you buy through Shopee and you'll find 10 sellers of this one product. Well, how do they differentiate themselves? There will be some sort of marketing perhaps that they do, loyalty that they create, that will enable them to have a degree of market power. So yes, perfect competition in real life, very difficult, but is an ideal. Right, so we've done that. The other end of the spectrum, that way, is a monopoly, which is also one of my fun words for the day. Right? It's got that quite nice cadence to it. It's got that, a bit of a rhythm to the word, which I used to use in my head quite a bit. Right? In the supermarket when I was stacking shelves, you'd come up with rhythms in your head and patterns to keep your brain going when you were doing something that was perhaps a little bit, well, brainless. Yeah. So we have monopolies, imperfectly competitive. Not only are they imperfectly competitive, they are the imperfect competition. There is no more extreme end of imperfect competition than a monopoly. So therefore, how many businesses are there? One. Right? That's it. Mono, one. Monopoly, one parrot. Right? That's all there is. Sorry about the parrot joke. Okay? Now, it is entirely possible to have monopoly businesses in real life. It is. And there could be some. You could find some real-life examples of monopoly businesses, or businesses that have created their own monopoly, because businesses will quite like moving to that end. They don't have the competition. Right? They're able to absorb all of the profits for themselves. So they are going to be, sorry.
So let's say as a socialist government, right? Would the government then be a monopoly because they control everything?
To an extent, you could make that as an argument, yes. Yeah. Now, market structures go beyond those two extremes. You've got points in the middle, right, along that continuum. And one of the next is called an oligopoly. It's another word that's got quite a nice cadence to it, right? It's also one of the words I used to find quite difficult to say when I was younger. Oligopoly, right? It is where you've taken a step away from a monopolist, so you're not monopolizing the industry anymore, right? But you're nowhere near competitive. So what we're saying is that there are a few firms in there, a handful, and they are very, very large. And if you look around, you're likely to see quite a lot of oligopolies. Industries, entire industries that are made up of 4 or 5 key major players. And I mentioned one just before, the smartphone market. There are 4 or 5 key players in that business, and that's it. Okay? I mean, Iqmal, you might have decided I'm going to manufacture my own smartphone. Start my own business manufacturing smartphones. But there's a reality to how you might go about that suggests that it might be too difficult. Whereas other businesses that might be more, say, service-based, so online tutoring, for example, set that up, bang, 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 all done, create a web page, pay your money here, relatively straightforward to do. So much less likely to be an oligopoly. Then there is another one that's at the other end of the spectrum, right? So going back to perfect competition, if you were to take one step in from perfect competition, then you come across the structure called a monopolistic competitor. A monopolistic competitor. Now those sound like a monopoly. So again, this is a track for young players. The terminology, the language that we use can trip you up. So you need to be careful. A monopolistic competitor is as close as we can get, more or less, to perfect competition, but they have their own little local monopoly. So there are hundreds possibly of these businesses, but because of where they operate, they might be the only one that you personally go to. Right? So say, for example, a classic one that gets used is hairdressers. There might be one hairdresser that you go to all the time because you know them, they know you, they know your hairstyle, they know whatever it is you need, you like them, you like the customer service from them, whatever it is, you go to that hairdresser, even though there are a whole bunch of others. You could make an argument about the restaurant industry as well, the fast food industry. Lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of possible options, but you might have your favourite restaurant. Right? Whether that is a restaurant with a giant letter M out the front, okay. Right? Or something else. It probably isn't a big surprise to you sometimes when we're driving along the road and we might look out the window and see a restaurant there with a big M out the front, and there's a queue of cars waiting to go through the drive-through of it. And I've always found that to be quite fascinating because there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different offerings out there, right? More than we could possibly imagine, but people will stick to the local that they know. You know? There was a new one that's just relatively recently opened up near us called Taco Bell. Have any of you been to Taco Bell? Apparently not. Are you still there? Hello? Am I still online? Yes? Hi. You have? Excellent. Okay. Now, on occasion online, people will comment about the restaurants that they've gone to. And in the forum online for the area where we live, sometimes they will post pictures of a massive big queue for that particular restaurant. And we've never been to it, but that might be something quite interesting to have a go at some point in the future. But the idea is that it is perfectly competitive, or it is very competitive, but maybe it's the nearest one to you. Right? So then there's that behavioural economics thing coming in. Although there are other options that are further away, so you make the rational choice to go to the one that's nearest you, your local. Okay. So all of those fit along that spectrum. So therefore, the connection that we have between market structure and market power is all about the level of competition. It is the less competitive it is, the more power the individual businesses have in that marketplace. The more competitive the market is, the less individual power each business has, right, within that industry. And again, it's one of those situations where you will know this yourself. You will have seen this. You will have dealt with the Amazons of the world. You will have dealt with Apple, right? You will be very familiar with those sorts of businesses. The Googles, right? Such a prevalent business that its name of the business is now used as an adjective to describe going online and looking up things. You know, that's incredible. Other businesses that have got a similar impact on our language is Sellotape. Right? Sellotape is a brand, right? And yet we use it all the time to describe, I'm going to go and get some sellotape, even if it isn't Sellotape, it's some other company. You know? Or in America they use the word Xerox. I'm going to go and Xerox this, which means photocopy, because Xerox is the big company out there with all the power, so they're all... You know? Right. The connection between market structure and market power is the level of competition that there is. Now we're thinking about the economic actors within this particular market model, right? And the big economic actors that we should consider first is us, the consumer. Right? That's who we are. We consume. right? Products that come in. We're going to be talking about this idea here, demand, which might feel a little demanding. No. Right, we're going to be discussing what demand is. We're going to think about individual demand and also market demand and what those words mean and how they work within the context of a market. We're going to analyse some of those behavioural economics ideas that we've thought about before in the context of demand. We're going to link this idea of demand through to some of the economic theories that you've researched and presented, so it will all, synchronise in hopefully quite nicely. All right. Firstly, what is demand? A very cut down definition, quite straightforward one in fact. Demand is an individual's willingness, the desire that they have, and their ability to buy or purchase a good and or a service. So it doesn't matter whether it's good or a service, there's demand. You'll notice that there are two parts. The two parts are the idea of willingness. That's your desire. If you don't want a product, there is no demand for it. So someone can come up to you with whatever the amazing product is that they're trying to sell, and you don't want it. You have no desire for it. So therefore there is no demand. Likewise, ability. Can you afford the product? Now, I saw the other day there was a release of information about the latest Apple iPhone, the iPhone 13. Kind of unfortunate, but those of us who were born on the 13th. Now, the price of the latest top spec Apple iPhone, do we know how much it is? Anybody have a guess? I don't know if I've asked you this before. How much do you think it is? The top end, the very top end. How expensive is the iPhone? 600 US? Oh, goodness me. Pricing it in USD. I was thinking more along the lines of Malaysian ringgit. If you were to get the biggest specification, so biggest memory, right, the full package with cameras, all the cameras and all of that, how much do you reckon it'd set you back Malaysian ringgit wise? I did look. All right, let's chuck something into the chat. What do we think? 5K, 7K, close to 5K. Yeah. Okay. 7K, 5K. I think 5K would be a nice number. 10K is a bit much. Here in Malaysia, according to the official website, the top specification, so the 13 Pro Max Super Duper Special Extra, is close to 7,500 ringgit to buy. And that's obviously not including accessories and if you need to buy the power adapter and all of those other things which are extra costs. Yeah, exactly. However, if you have a look at the specifications for the phone, you might think, actually, because the top end, remember, it's their flagship top end phone. It's got 1 terabyte of memory. 1 terabyte. Yeah, that's bigger than computers. Right? That's huge. The cameras and what they're able to do apparently is just mind-blowing, right? Which means if you are someone who takes a lot of photos, if you're someone who, the quality of the photos, etc., is going to be something that is important to you, it might be part of your livelihood, okay? And videoing as well. It's going to be able to do really, really good, apparently, videos. And you're apparently able to edit it on the phone. Right? So all of that sort of technology for certain people in one certain market, they're going to say, well, 7,500, yeah, absolutely. Right? Because they might be already looking at buying an SLR camera, which, to get a really good one, you're not getting much under that. And that's just a camera. It doesn't do the other things that a phone will do. So, maybe. And it is smaller. Yeah. Absolutely right. And it's apparently got longer battery life as well. Like an hour and a half extra battery, some such thing. So if you've got a spare 7,500, then, you know, I'm guessing Apple would be very happy for you to part with it. Willingness and ability. If you don't have that 7,500, then chances are you have no demand for that product at all. You might still want it, you just can't afford it. Yeah? There's that difference. There's a clear difference between those. So what we use, the word we use is effective demand. Right? And effective demand is where there is a willingness and an ability. Right? So in order to get around the idea that people don't necessarily have the $7,500 just to, here you go, right? You'll notice that the shops offer terms, you know, so they'll say, well, pay me 1,000 now and 1,000 next month and 1,000, you know, until you're, 50 or however long it takes. And they will do that because they're trying to encourage demand for the product. What's this? Some of you will know what this is. Some of you will read the title and know what it is. What is it? What have I done? What have we done here? What's this? Can you explain it? Just in the chat. What do you think that is? Yeah, to put that in context, my wife, who does a whole lot of art and all sorts of things on her iPad is 1 terabyte worth of data. So that's now a phone that's got the same memory capacity as the big, powerful iPads, which is amazing. Now, reading the title, here we go. It is a demand schedule. Or schedule, depending on whether you went to school or shul. Right. What we've done is we've created here a table. That's it. So a demand schedule is a table that represents the quantities we demand of a product. Oh, excellent, Faisal. Well done. Yes, exactly right. It represents the quantities demanded of a product, whether that's a good or a service, and at a range of prices. Absolutely right, yeah? Well done. Now, you'll notice that there's a set way that this is illustrated, okay? Firstly, we put price on the left. Then the quantities, in this case, hours of babysitting per month. But whatever the quantities are, they're on the right. Now, in economics, we do that all the time. That's got to be how we draw these schedules up. Price on the left, quantity on the right. And it's going to become quite important because what we're going to do is we're going to use this table, right, and create something with it. But if we have a look at it, now this is babysitting hours, right? So if the price was $4 an hour, apparently we'd be perfectly happy with that and we'd buy 55 hours of that per month, right? Because for us, say, the consumer, that would be cheaper, affordable, right? Willingness and ability. Whereas when the price per hour increases, what do we see happening to the quantity? What do we see happening to the quantity demanded? Yes, indeed, Adam, well done. It decreases. The price is increasing here, which means it is becoming increasingly less affordable. So you would expect, rationally, to see a decrease in the quantities demanded. Now you'll notice I'm using the word quantities all the time when I'm talking about this. These are quantities, numbers, demanded at the range of prices. That's how that is a table, a schedule for your demand. If we add all of this, we can actually see, in fact, if we plot this, right, you'll be able to see it as a whole demand for this particular product. And it's going to look something like that. This is called a demand curve. Now, apologies that it isn't actually curved. All right? We call it a curve because, well, in real life, more often than not, it actually is curved. However, in order to do the analysis, the maths, the applications that we do, right, at IB level, a straight line demand curve is easier to use and it's easier to do the analysis with, so straight line. How do you create it? Well, you see it's just a matter of plotting the points. And you'll also notice price is on the left, quantity on the right. And again, that's part of that idea of a convention. Now, I know you're thinking a convention like, I don't know, Star Trek convention, but here we're talking conventions with regards to the rules. How do we apply these concepts? There are rules. So price is always on the left, quantity on the right. If you get those sorts of things wrong, it's going to lead to all sorts of upside downness with your model, and it's not going to work. So you take the information, the data from the table, and you're just going to plot the points. So this one is, it's a different model, yes. This one is about gasoline, which is American for petrol, right? And we're saying here that at a price of $5, they're not going to demand any, but at a price of $4.50, they're going to demand 40 gallons. Americans use gallons, right? Now the scale isn't right, you'll notice. Okay, mathematicians amongst you will have very quickly seen that the scale of this particular curve has gone from 0 to 2 and then 2 to $2.50. Right, so this isn't right. And it's also gone from 0 to 40 and then 40 to 50. That's a trap for young players. All right? What you need to do, mathematicians amongst you, is do this, which is called breaking the scale, which means you can basically just make any point your starting point because you've broken the scale, and so you're not going from 0 to 40 anymore. Something along that sort of line. Then once you've plotted each point in Cartesian coordinates, x and y, yep. Once you've plotted them all in, sorry, it's sounding a lot like maths here, then you just play that famous economics game of connect the dots, and you've got a demand curve. You've got a demand curve, in this case for gasoline. You'll notice there is a title, there is an axis, these things, axis, one of those. There is a scale, yes, we said that the scale was wrong, and the curve in and of itself. Now, to remember that, we often tell students TASC, we've got to complete the task. Some students prefer TALL because they feel very tall, so they need to know the title, the axis, the line, and the label. Whatever works for you to remember the convention. Examiners are going to get a bit picky with how you arrange this. Right? Labels, are they there, are they not there, arrows, all of anything that could possibly not work. So I would label this as well. So they've got a label here, pointing at it, saying demand curve. I tend to write the letter D at the end of it to signal that it is demand. Now obviously they've put D up here, which gets a bit confusing, which may be why they've done that. Yeah. Hopefully that doesn't look too scary. Right? Those of you who have done IGSE economics, you'll be very familiar with this. Okay? I'm sure, because what we then need to do is we need to test this relationship. We've got a relationship here. This is what this is. It's a relationship between price and quantity. And when we talked about the methodology of economics, we talked about how we had relationships, and we looked at the theories that could possibly come out from those relationships. We developed some theories, and then from there we might test those theories, and we might create an economics law from them. So that's what ended up happening. Good old Adam Smith and Alfred Marshall had this idea of a law of demand. And what they are saying is this, and it looks awful complicated, but please don't panic. All right? If we assume nothing else changes, you'll remember that, we had a look at that a little while ago, then if the price of the good decreases, if the price of the good decreases, then the quantity demanded will increase. And the same works the other way around, right? Vice versa. Got to use different languages just to make it official. Right? Now, this idea of all else being equal, we remember that because we discussed that again with regards to the methodology of economics, is the phrase ceteris paribus, holding all other variables constant. We're keeping anything outside of price and quantity, we're just ignoring. Okay? We're just focusing on this one particular relationship because that's what we want. And for those of you who are in relationships, all right, it's a good idea to just focus in on that relationship and ignore everything else that's out there. You need some ceteris paribus going on. All right? That's what that is. The law of demand. It is a law, not a relationship, because of the idea of ceteris paribus. Yeah? So what we say then, from the table, from the curve, the law of demand is possible. Therefore, prices change and quantity demanded changes inversely to prices. Inversely to the price. That means they go in opposite directions. All right? They're not going in one direction, they're going in opposite directions. All right? They're also not particularly keen on the pop group either. One direction. No! All right. Let's move on. Dun. There it is. Oh, there's Alfred again, your friend. When the price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Law of demand. The relationship is inverted, inversely. Inverse. So now what you need to do is to think about the actual curve itself. That's what the law says, and then we need to think about the curve itself. We need to think about the consumers who that curve is representing and the rational way they behave. And they behave because of these two ideas. They behave that way because of these two ideas. One is called the income effect, and the other is called the substitution effect. And it goes along the lines of this. When the price of the good decreased, just as the law said, we saw the quantity demanded increase. And why did that happen? Because consumers felt wealthier. Right? They felt they had more income because the price has fallen. So that ability that they had has now increased. So they feel that they have more buying power. It's perceived buying power, but they feel that way. So they're going to increase the quantities that they consume. An income effect. There's also something called a substitution effect. And again, we're assuming rationality. Right? With all of this, this is very classical economic thinking. Right? If the price of the good decreases, then the consumer is going to move to the product that is cheaper, the cheaper alternative. Right? So if it decreases, then you're going to find consumers switch to that product away from a relatively more expensive product. Or, conversely, if the price was to increase, or Nike, depending on which brand of sports shoes you like, if the price was to increase, then what you'd see is the consumers will switch to a relatively cheaper alternative, and they'll actually leave the demand for this product and demand more of another product. So those two effects are what gives the law of demand its the ability to predict what's happening on the curve. All right, going up and down the slide, all right, like in the playground. That's more or less what we're talking about. Last bit of theory for the day. I apologize, there's a lot of theory happening. All right, here it is. Now, our friend here is Thorstein Veblen, and he came up with an exception. Now, again, you might make an argument about whether the law of demand is a law. You might discuss the TOK-ness of our use of the words in comparison to the sciences, yeah, in particular. I don't know if they have laws in history. I don't know. Do they? You have to find that one out. Now, because of some of the thinking that he came up with, he actually got economic theory named after him. Right? So that might be you. Right? The Faisal factor. Yeah? The Senna rule. You know, whatever it is that you've come up with. Now, Veblen came up with this exception to demand. So we know what the law of demand says, but Thorstein said, yeah, but what if, right, like the Marvel What If series, what if there was something a little bit different occurring? What if the good was really, really cool? What if it was a luxury good? What if this good was so amazingly luxurious that even though the price had risen to 7,500 ringgit, because of the nature of the the coolness of the product, people buy it anyway, you know, because they want to have the brand. They want to walk around and show people the phone. Now, the iPhone's been around for 13 years now. Yes, it has, because they're up to iPhone 13. So if you go all the way back those 13 years ago, I remember them well, okay, to when the very first iPhones were coming out. People walking around proudly with their iPhones. And they had the little plug in them for your headphones. And so people would know that you had an iPhone just because of your headphones. Because they were the only ones in the market that had those little white headphones. So that became a signal for people to come up and try and rob you, essentially, because you were wearing the headphones, so therefore you must have the phone. To the extent where my mother rang me up, concerned, when you go out, make sure you don't put your headphones in, otherwise people might try and rob you of your phone. They're not going to try and rob you. Veblen goods are goods that are luxury end goods, that don't behave the way we expect them to behave based on the law of demand. They behave in an exception, a way we don't expect. The next one down is called Giffen Goods, which I love the name. Right? Economics has got all the best words. Yeah? Giffen Goods. These are goods that aren't luxury end, they're at the other end. These are goods that are considered to be inferior, of poor quality, but they are so poor quality that they are the poorest quality that there is. Right? Giffen Goods. These are the ones where, if you're talking like cuts of meat, right, like in Venezuela, right, and there were cuts of meat, but the meat was actually rotten. And there was a market that was selling rotten meat. And the reason why they were selling rotten meat was that was all the shopkeeper had, and that was all the people could afford. So there was a market for rotten meat. So that could be classified as a Giffen good, because although the price was down, right? Sorry, although the price was higher, right? Consumers were again buying more of it. They should substitute away from it, but they're not. They're substituting towards it. So it is behaving like the law of demand, not like the law of demand. It is an exception to it. Yeah? The next one that we see is an apparent necessity. Apparent, another word for that is reputed necessity, or if you like, a necessity by reputation. So what we're meaning there is something that you have that you feel you need. So these sorts of things, for example, right, that you probably don't need at all, but you feel you need it. So therefore you buy it. Again, regardless of the price. The price could be quite expensive in comparison, and they are, right, in comparison to other drinks. But you feel you need it. So therefore you buy it. It is an apparent necessity. It's not that I do need it, it's that I think, a reputation. Would Red Bulls count as one? I don't understand, Adam. I missed that one. They count as one? Yes, they do. An apparent necessity, but only for those who do consider that. Yeah? All right? And it's going to be different for everybody. And again, you've got to take that behavioural economics into thinking, that the rational consumer should behave in accordance with the law of demand. But what if they're addicted to the product? The rational consumer should consume away from a product if this product is harmful to you, like cigarettes. But what if they're addicted to the product? And they can't. They'll buy it anyway. Right? There's a tax put on this product because it's considered bad for you. Well, people buy it anyway. Right? Reputed necessities or apparent necessities. Future price expectations. Very straightforward. If you think the price is going to go up tomorrow, you buy it today. You buy it today because you think it's going to go up tomorrow. It's just a relatively straightforward idea, just like that. Okay? Again, it's not following the law of demand. The next one down, you may not have come across this word before. I don't know if we've even mentioned it in class. Apologies if we have already. The bandwagon effect. Right? Now, it is about trends. Right? Preferences, but trends, fashions, where people will follow what the other person does because it then becomes trendy to do so, fashionable to do so. Yes, you can make that as an argument, absolutely. Right? Any of those trends, and these days, because of the speed of, information travels at the speed of thought, more or less. So trends will go like this and this and this, and all of a sudden, and it can be behavioural trends or purchasing trends or whatever, right? People will buy them. And again, it doesn't have to be a good product. It doesn't have to make sense at all. It just has to be trendy. The thing that got me, that really, it annoyed me, in New Zealand, the students used to wear these little bracelets, right, on their, absolutely. They used to wear these little bracelets, although the students in New Zealand, I wouldn't say that to them, because they're like this big and built like a small tank, right? They will wear these bracelets, and the bracelets apparently had magnets in them, and that would then make them better sports people because they were wearing this bracelet with magnets in it. I'm not kidding you. That's exactly what they thought. To the extent where the rugby team was given official permission, because it's the rugby team, to continue to wear these bracelets because they believed so passionately that these bracelets were the things that were causing them to be good at rugby. Yeah? But one player does it, and then the others see that and go, oh, well, look at how well they're doing with, it must work. And, it's the bandwagon effect. All of a sudden, they all were wearing it. Right? It was technically breaking the uniform code of the school, and I was one of the people who had to try and discuss this with them and get them to take them off. Now, to give you an idea, the rugby players that were wearing these, they were wearing the top end of them. They're a rubber bracelet, for Pete's sake. Right? But they had little bits of magnet apparently in them. And the top end of these bracelets cost, I think, like $50 or $80 New Zealand just for one bracelet. And if you were to convert that to Malaysian ringgit, you'd multiply that by 4. Right? And you kind of understand. And then they didn't want to take them off, because if they took them off and lost them, then they'd have to pay that money again. It was an absolute scam. Right? It really was. There's no benefit to it at all other than in here. Right? So those of you looking at psychology and stuff, right, and TOK with the power of words and economics with regards to the demand for these products, right? The next version of them, they're still out there, by the way. The next version of these same bracelets had silver in it, silver nitrate. And that apparently, again, heals you quicker, as well as the magnets, which make you more balanced and able to... I'm not kidding you. That is exactly what people thought of these things. Now, if you think that's insane, which, to be perfectly honest, at the time I did, right? There was a shop in the mall, in IOI City Mall, that was selling these bracelets, these very bracelets. Right? Not that long ago, only probably 2 years ago. And they were the top end ones with the silver in them. It was a little pop-up shop selling golfing related gear, like sticks and, golfing things. And it was to sell it to the people who played golf, quite clearly, because apparently wearing these bracelets meant you could hit the golf ball better. So the bandwagon effect, if everybody's doing it, you do it as well, you buy the same product as them. If there's an emergency, a crisis happening, oh my word, we've got to spend the money, we've got to buy this product because we need it, our air conditioning is broken, we've got to spend the money because we can't live without, it's against the law of demand, it's an exception to the law of demand. Next one is this idea of ignorance. We are assuming that the consumers know. We're assuming that the consumers are able to do the calculation and work out the different prices. But do you sit there on Shopee and work out the different shops and how each one of them charges a slightly different price? Do you put things into your wish list and then a couple of days later they mark the price down to encourage you to buy it? All of those sorts of things, or do you just buy now? Changes in tastes and fashions and preferences, they're all exceptions again to the law. Right, now, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to stop the meat there because that's a huge amount of theory, a little overload. I apologize, but it's good to get started and get stuck in. Now I'm going to stop the